Hello, everyone. I'm Natalie Kunzman, MD, and today we need to talk about the COVID vaccine, which is a question I'm getting every single day online and in the office. So, should everyone get a COVID vaccine? And if so, why? But if not, why not? So, let's first dive into the way the current COVID vaccine works and figure out why this topic is so debatable and sometimes controversial. So, first of all, the COVID-19 virus is an RNA duplicating virus. Now, a virus cannot live independently and it needs to get inside of our cells and hijack our machinery to make more of it. So there are DNA viruses that can get inside of our cell and replicate and reproduce using their DNA sequences. The usual course of business in our cells for us is to use DNA to create some RNA, for that RNA to go to a ribosome and manufacture a protein that is determined by the DNA sequence or the DNA blueprint. Now, in an RNA virus, there is a reverse engineering process, which is somewhat atypical. So the RNA, which is just one strand, must make a reverse transcriptase to create the DNA first and then go through the usual course to manufacture a protein or duplicate itself to hijack and live within our DNA. Now, COVID, just like HIV and several other viruses, is an RNA virus, and it is grouped as a retrovirus since they have to work backwards to create the DNA. And this retroengineering is how the current immunization that Moderna and Pfizer capitalizes on. And of course, these are the only two that are out on the market and being given yet today. So let me also say that these are the first immunizations of their kind used to go after a virus. So a standard vaccine, so when they first came out, such as the smallpox vaccine, it basically came out giving a very small dose of the disease itself, and then it allowed the immune system to fight it off so that a large amount of the virus that was trying to infect us, the immune system already had some weapons to fight it off because it fought off a little bit of this virus. So this is a simple concept as like will heal like. Then we've advanced to take portions of a virus or bacteria so that just enough of the pathogen can be seen by our immune cells to develop some of the antibodies in case the whole illness exposed us. So there's a lot of debate about vaccine harm actually coming from the preservatives or the fixatives or large mass manufacturing and combining several vaccines in one rather than the original homeopathic style of introducing live virus or bacteria into our system. Now, in the case of the mRNA, messenger RNA vaccines, the technology has advanced to a whole new level that is minimally charted as a preventive tactic. So it is new, it's nifty and very slick technology, and the current two being administered work by taking the virus's RNA snippets and they hide that snippet in a lipid droplet so that it can float around in our system and get into our antigen presenting cells to work within our nucleus and cytoplasm and take that snippet to reverse engineer into our DNA to make protein copies, and many of these protein copies of the spike protein of COVID. So that's the little spikes that we see when we look at the structure of COVID. Now, once our body sees the spike proteins, we have our natural killer T cells to go after it, but also it helps stimulate our B cells to make antibodies against these spike proteins. So it goes after both arms of our immune system, the innate and the B cell related immunization or immunology. Now, theoretically, we will eliminate all of those spike proteins with these antibodies and be ready for the real battle if COVID-19 enters our system. We know what to recognize and fight back. And that sounds very slick, doesn't it? So why aren't we allowing our kids to get it yet and considering pregnant women to possibly avoid it? Well, let's talk about the facts. This is the fastest immunization to ever hit our market. So traditional immunizations that grow out viruses or particles take up to 8 years to make it through the FDA. And this one took months, 332 days to be exact. Now, reportedly, it was easy and fast to do because the companies were already working on messenger RNA type of technology for cancer research and other illnesses. Now, apparently, it is also cheaper to do this kind of technology. And we fully understand that in a pandemic, in desperate times, we require desperate measures. So the race was on. Now, money is needed for everything, and our government, as well as collaboration with other governments, sunk billions of dollars into this endeavor, thank God. So there is also years worth of research with previous viruses such as SARS and MERS to understand this type of technology. So essentially, it was already in the works for the past 10 or 15 years. Now, getting emergency status to run it through the FDA was also crucial to get it to the market this fast. So about 15 years ago, there were some research labs at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and they tried to harness messenger RNA for some drugs and some viruses, but found that it stimulated harmful inflammation. So the real trick was learning how to protect this messenger RNA snippet in a lipid nanoparticle to quiet down the aggressiveness of the inflammation in our system. Now that said, the vaccine, these vaccines in the studies excluded those patients with most autoimmune conditions or if they were on DMARDs or modifying medications. Now there's a real concern about the vaccine causing flaring of autoimmune conditions. Now this is an unknown, and any recommendation you may receive is based upon conjecture thus far. The potential of the infection of COVID causing a flare may outweigh the side effects, which leaves a big unknown. So the vaccine so far is indicated for the 18 years old on up population. Now remember, the young people and their very healthy, robust, innate immune systems do very well against the COVID-19 fight, and any off-label use of the COVID vaccine in this population would be premature and irresponsible. Now, pregnant women ask me often about whether or not they should receive the injection. So while it is felt to be relatively safe in a mom, it has not been studied on a developing fetus, and in this regard, I caution against it. There are too many unknowns. Which brings me up to the safety data. Now, up until this point, those entities that have been responsible to reporting the safety of any vaccine have been the manufacturers themselves. And of course, they have a guarded interest in maintaining the use and distribution of those products that they are making. Now, Moderna had a small third-party analysis, and thus far, I have passionately believed in third-party safety reporting and auditors of our vaccines. And we don't have many third-party safety data studies with most of our current vaccines. So Moderna thus far went after their reporting data, and they went after lessening of the symptoms of COVID as a good positive outcome. So this is a reminder that neither of these two manufacturers yet can prevent the disease itself. So safety currently is referring to not just immediate days and weeks after the shot, but we also want to consider long-term safety data. So of course we can easily get data on whether or not somebody's arm hurts after the shot, or if there are symptoms such as chills or cold symptoms on the first or second shot, and that is the short-term information. And it seems harmless enough thus far from the data so far. I am definitely concerned about the safety data for years or months out, particularly with vulnerable patients, the autoimmune patient, those patients on medications, and so on. This is the long-term safety data that needs to be tracked. And if this ingenious technology is as specific as a snippet of RNA, the question becomes, will we cross-react since we are also stimulating the natural killer cells and the innate immunity as well early on? And this is where time will tell. So we also are unsure how long the immunization will last in its efficacy. If the virus stays the same out in the public, we will eventually be able to collect data for how it lowers the disease and if we can prevent any of the spread. However, the coronaviruses in general do mutate, as many viruses do. That's just the nature of the way they operate to bypass our immune system to get inside of our cells so they can live a few more days in there to replicate. Now, perhaps that spike protein will change its shape enough for the current vaccine to not recognize over the next year or two. But this is similar to influenza, and the reason why we require new flu shots every year. Now, third, an intact immune system is needed to get the maximum effect of an immunization. They are not foolproof whatsoever for the weakened immune system. Now, all of this being said, who should actually get this shot? And please, I believe this is an individualized decision and there is no right or wrong. So clearly, the highest risk people are those who are exposed often to this virus, and that includes us healthcare workers. The highest risk people for getting severe symptoms, such as the cytokine storm, includes older people, those with lung problems, those with heart disease, obesity, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and again, those that have weakened immune systems who might be on chemotherapy, etc. Now, your potential risk of severe infection, if you are in any of that population, your potential risk of the severe infection may far outweigh any side effects you may have now or in the future of this COVID immunization. If you've already had COVID, we can presume that potentially the next infection you may get might be less severe. But we're not quite sure about this because we are still within the year of this pandemic. So for my intact, healthy, young, or autoimmune folks. You are those people I'd like for you to really evaluate yourselves individually. Without long-term safety data on worsening autoimmunity, pro-inflammation, Guillain-Barré, post-viral syndromes, degenerative neurologic compromise, you folks may want to sit out and wait for the next several rounds and maybe step in the back of the line before you sign up for the COVID vaccine. So I hope this has given you information to decide who are at high risk, who may want to consider this very novel, very intricate, very sophisticated immunization, and assess your risks of getting the disease, your risks of getting the severe portion of the disease in relationship to your medical conditions versus being intact, immune, and healthy and awaiting more safety data. Again, I'm Natalie Kunzman, MD. Subscribe to my channel below, and until we meet again, be well.